All right. How are you, Mr. Charles?
I'm
Aloha,
doing fine,
everybody.
brother. I am doing fine. How are you?
I'm all right. I think I'm like everybody else. A little bit of anxiety, a little bit of frustration, a little bit of stress, a little bit of confusion. I watched the announcement about the DOE today. I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired, but I never understand what the heck they were trying to say. I really didn't, and
Yeah.
I really don't want to get into that with the lieutenant governor tonight, but we're definitely gonna have to get somebody on to explain that. I mean, I don't understand. They never answered every question that was asked of them. They went all around. They never answered it. I could be completely wrong. I could be completely wrong. Um, and yeah, maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I just was having a rough day and I couldn't understand it, but I
Oh,
couldn't understand. I
let me
couldn't
say
understand.
this before we do anything. Aloha, everybody, and welcome. Please, at this time, take this moment to share or start a watch party. But let's share this because there's a lot of important information that we're going to cover tonight, and hopefully, the lieutenant governor can answer some pretty hard questions. I know many of you have the questions out there. All we're going to ask is please let's use some let's be I'm not saying let's sugarcoat this thing, but let's keep the unnecessary comments off the air. It's kind of distracting because there's a lot to cover, and it's very important for the future of travel for Kauai, and not only for our visitors but for us as well, the locals, whether you have to travel to the mainland to pick up a family member and come back, it's going to apply to us too. So there's some confusion right now, but what we're going to try to do, since the lieutenant governor is in charge of that aspect of the overall program, because they also have General Hara and Dr. Libichar from the DOH. They have their respective duties. Everything to do with travel will be left with the lieutenant governor, and that's what we're here tonight to get all of that information for you folks. Okay. So I appreciate all of you joining us. I'm Uncle Charlie, and that's Uncle Mel right there.
I hate to be the bad guy, but I'm gonna tell you right now, if any personal comments, personal attacks, I will block you. Let me just get that out of the way. Any personal attacks, you will be blocked. And we try to keep the integrity of this show at a level where people want to join us. That in fact, people not what happens is people get locked into the debates on the chat and they're missing the content that our guests are providing. So if you want to go take on somebody, do them on private message. I cannot stop you from doing that, but do not personally attack anyone. Just if you have an opinion, you disagree, that's fine. That's what this is about.
Hmm.
But personal attacks, I can tell you right now, starting tonight, you will be blocked, and that block is permanent. Okay, I want to keep this show professional. I want to keep this show. I want to have it where we can all engage in the discussion without people feeling intimidated. And I just don't want to see that on this show. You're welcome to do your own Facebook lives and go off the chart. That's fine. I'll probably join and watch because sometimes it's entertaining. But as we try to move down this road, and as we have been approached by key legislators, key decision makers, Charlie and I both have been approached, and they talk about this show as being the medium to get information out. We don't ruin that. We don't, and we don't charge no money for this. We don't. There's no ads. There's none of that stuff. And we want this to stay. We want this format to stay for all of you, as well as for decision makers and lawmakers and God, man, I'd love to see the governor come on one day and share his thoughts and because maybe he knows something we don't. I don't think so,
Yep,
but maybe
exactly.
he does. Maybe he does. And as much as we criticize, scrutinize, you know, it's really part of the discussion because we don't get the answers from the available sources, the media. And that's what we try to bring you with this show. We try to bring you with that type of information where it's unedited, it's unscripted.
You know, I
Uh,
I,
you
I
know, you
wanna
know,
I wanna address someone. No, a viewer is saying is did he miss something that we're getting scolding? No, we're not scolding you. The message is tonight is very important because we only got several more weeks before we open up travel, and there is some debate as to how it's set up, and there's some confusion. Our job tonight is we're gonna get it straight from the horse's mouth to try to clear up some of that confusion. That's why we're asking. Um, we're not scolding anyone. We've had in the past debates going on that doesn't even pertain to the subject at hand, and it gets very distracting to some of the viewers here. And tonight it's all about getting you folks the information. That's what we're here for. So I hope you understand. You know, we're not scolding anybody. We have, you know, it's not often that we can get the lieutenant governor on. As you know, several days ago, it was announced that the new team was put together, and he's one of that component for the traveling portion, and that's very very important because we are looking at opening up our state. Now there's much concern surrounding that, so we're hoping that we can get at least some answers because right now there's more questions than really answers, and that's what it's all about tonight. We want to make sure that everybody can hear it and you know get the information correct for you folks. So we're not here scolding anybody. I hope you understand that.
yeah. And the reason I brought it up was I've seen the chatter over the last couple of days. As soon as we announced that the lieutenant governor was coming on, I saw the chatter from a lot of people. This is not pointed at any one or two people. I just, and in my private messages, in my texts, and my phone calls, they're talking to people. Some people are really, and I tell you, I don't know if there's anyone more pissed off than me because we are where we were months ago. You know, and this is what I'm going to ask the lieutenant governor tonight. Months ago, when they unveiled this travel quarantine program, uh, it started off with the one pre-test 72 hours before you leave. That's how it started. And then we had expert after expert after expert tell us about how inefficient and ineffective a one test system would be. And then I heard with my own ears as I listened to the governor's press conferences that he too felt that we would have to start looking at a post-arrival test as well. So you know, again, dumb, you know, believe what I hear. And so when this announcement came out, obviously with the one test, we're right back where we started. And that is why, you know, and I know it's really tough for me because Josh is a good friend of mine. He's not well. He wasn't on the news today. I didn't see him on the morning news today, so I hope he's well. I texted him this morning. He said he was doing fine. But a day before yesterday, or was it yesterday when he was on, he sounded like he had a really bad cold. So I got to believe that he's not feeling well. So, you know, but the questions have to be asked. And I know Josh is professional enough to understand that none of this stuff is personal, but we have some legitimate questions. Somebody's asking about somebody. Is it just me or do Mel and Charlie sound muted? I don't know.
Testing one, two. Can everybody out there just type in that you can hear us okay, folks? Just let us know. We want to make sure. Okay, got it. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you very much.
Angie. Yeah, so I can't remember who that was now. Sharon, you might want to exit out and come back in. You know, just reboot or get out of Facebook and come back in, and hopefully you connect well. It seems like everybody's hearing us okay. So anyway, Josh is here, Lieutenant Governor. So I'm going to bring him on in.
Okay.
Don't forget, share this, ladies and gentlemen. Share it now. Share it now.
Oh. There you go.
Doc, why are you wearing a smock?
A scrubs. That's scrubs.
A scrub?
This is scrubs. This is what I wear when I take out your spleen.
That's like intimidation already. You know, that's like starting off already being really intimidated, man. How you, boss? How you doing, sir?
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you so much. You guys have been wonderful, and people have been writing me incredibly kind notes and just wonderful people everywhere across our state. I'm fine. My symptoms are much less than they were. I seem to have turned the corner, I think, yesterday afternoon.
That's good.
You sound like you have a cold. You sound like you're congested. That's kind of what it says. I noticed that on the news a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I have that, and whenever I get a cold or a virus, I always feel it up in my nose and a little bit in the chest, but this time it's been mostly right through here. And there's a little cough associated with COVID for me, but overall, that's the main symptom now. Not too much else.
Good. How's the temperature going? It's all fine now. I know you had
No
the sweat
fevers.
a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I had the sweats. That was bad. It was uncomfortable, but no longer. I think it's been a day and a half or 2 days maybe since I felt that. And I was in a meeting today. I fell asleep during the meeting. So maybe it's because they were too bored. I don't know. But I fell asleep briefly for like 12 minutes. Couldn't believe it. But that's what happens when you have a meeting in your son's bed, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm very, very glad to hear that your family didn't get it. They tested negative. So that's a good news. That's a good news. Yeah.
I'm so grateful for that. More than anything else, I think you've heard this probably expressed by a lot of people that have had COVID. You just really worry about your loved ones because you don't want them to suffer. And you also don't, even if your case is not that bad, knock wood, you don't know if theirs will be or not. And so you just feel terrible that they could get sick.
Yes. Well, I'm
Well,
glad that
I know we're happy to have you on. We've asked for prayers every night, and I got to tell you, our viewers are so awesome. They're so awesome with their concern for you and the care. Really appreciate what you do, and we really appreciate what you've done. And so we're just happy to see you up and around, and we continue to pray for a complete recovery, and we got to get you back in the saddle. But I know you've said this many times, probably on every news channel, but give us a real quick recap of what the heck happened and
Yeah, it's
obviously we didn't what you can tell.
No, I'll tell you everything. I mean, I'm an open book, as you know. It was a pretty surreal experience because, as opposed to a lot of people, I actually, I'm forced to get regular tests, and so I was able to even get a lot of information in advance of getting sick. The Wednesday before I tested positive, before I went to the hospital, I had my obligatory test that I get within 3 days of serving in the hospital. So I had the nasopharyngeal test. Dr. Ireland did it, and it was terrible because that test, sucks, but it's okay. And I was negative. So, of course, we went on my shift, and two very dear friends of mine, one who's quite sick right now, Stan, but my two security guys who are just the greatest ever. One of them was a little bit sick. He had, his wife had been sick. She went to see her doctor, and they didn't make much out of it. They didn't do a test though. And she was just given some antibiotics. And then he was, of course, with her. And then he was feeling fine. So he came on duty. In retrospect, that probably was something we would rethink because that doctor didn't do a test. So we were all together in the car for over an hour and on the plane together, driving up the coast to Javi. And one of them started coughing quite a lot. We were wearing masks. We stopped at Starbucks, and I went and got Starbucks. So we were sipping coffees. But that was it. I didn't see them again until Tuesday. Come Tuesday morning, one of the guys was not feeling great. And so we went back to Oahu, and he immediately holed up at home and went and got a test. The other guy was feeling fine. So a couple days passed, didn't think anything of it. But then Wednesday, I started feeling a little not perfect. Like I often do, feel really tired after being on call for a couple days. And I felt kind of just terrible and went to sleep in the afternoon and slept for 4 hours, which is completely rare for me. And then woke up, had some food, and went back to sleep for 10 more hours. And so I slept like 14 hours. And when I woke up on Thursday, I felt good, but didn't make anything of it except, okay, I was fatigued. That's it. I felt kind of crappy, but I now feel fine. The next morning, we found out that one of my security guards, security detail, tested positive. So we immediately locked it down. I got a test a half hour later, and by that evening, they called me up and told me I was COVID positive, which kind of shocked me because I was feeling fine by then. In the subsequent days, I guess it gets in your head a little bit, right? Now I knew I was COVID positive. The second security guard also tested positive. So we know, then it made it totally clear. We took it upon ourselves to do what's right, which of course is I'm at home now. I locked in my son's bedroom, and we contact traced everybody like you're supposed to. Everybody's tested negative, amazingly. Everybody. We tested everybody that had come toward the hospital. We tested my staff. They all tested negative. We tested all the patients I saw, even though I wasn't sick until I got back here. And we tested the guys at the radio station where I went to do some of the PSAs for them on COVID, of all things. And amazingly, because I was wearing a mask, I think nobody tested positive and we're okay. But I've learned a lot. I mean, we could talk about what it has meant to me, but I think more importantly, I've learned a lot about what we can do with COVID and how we can actually beat it. Because I wore a mask and because we immediately contact traced everybody, there was no spread at all. None at all, even though I'm pretty high profile. And historically, when we've been not contact tracing and testing people, the virus spreads crazy, right? So it just goes to show you that a case can break through. I was in a car in close contact with somebody, I had no choice, but it stopped right there. In fact, had my security friend tested with his wife the day before going on call, if she had actually gotten a test, she would have been positive, and that would have ended it right there. He would have not come to work with me, and I would have never been exposed to COVID. So it gives you an idea of if you do the right things along the way, and it wasn't his fault. Actually, probably that doctor or nurse practitioner, whoever it was, they should have just done a test just because his wife had a cough, but they didn't do a test. So what happened was he got sick and then I got sick. And had we not checked, more people would have gotten sick.
And that is why the testing is so vital. That's why, and I appreciate your efforts and all of those that have been pushing the testing on our doctors to say, hey, even with the minimal symptoms, you got to test. That's how you stop this thing.
Right.
We got a lot of questions about your treatment.
I want to ask one question. Go ahead. I wanted to ask.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking. You're having a ton of questions about what treatment regimen are you on?
Sure. You want Charlie go first? You want me to start talking about that, the treatment?
Go with the treatment first. You can go with the treatment.
Okay,
and
this is it. I'm taking like a massive amount of vitamin C and vitamin D, and a lot of it. Vitamin C is water soluble, so when you have to take a leak, if you have too much in your system, you piss it out. Then vitamin D, which is fat soluble, and I have a little fat on me, it will stay in your system, so you gotta be a little bit more careful. But vitamin D is pretty benign also, and they say that these boost your immune system. I've been very blessed to not get bad symptoms, short of breath or high fevers, so I have not had to go into the hospital for oxygen, for remdesivir, for dexamethasone, the steroid, or any of that, knock wood. But I do believe in vitamin supplements. I've stayed very well hydrated. I've tried to stay a little bit active. I have an exercise bike to keep my lungs open up and, well expanded so I don't develop a cough or shortness of breath. But that's it pretty much. I'm drinking a lot of Gatorade and vitamins.
Real quick, is that D or D3? Vitamin D or vitamin D?
I got vitamin D and D3. So this is just a sub of vitamin D. There's several, yeah. I got the best gummy vitamins that you can get your friends to deliver to you in your bedroom. So I'm at everyone's mercy. This is your chance to take all the decent, fun pot shots at me as you can, because I'll be back out there in the world in 8 days. So,
taking out our spleens. Oh God.
That's right.
Okay, so the
Yes.
timeline on this is you took a test on a Wednesday,
Yeah.
and a week later, that's when you took that trip. Actually on Tuesday, and then Wednesday was when you started to notice that your guard a week later, from the time he took the test, he didn't seem too well at that point at that time. Correct?
A little bit more specific. I took the first test on Wednesday. It was negative.
Okay.
Then did my weekend on Big Island, and then felt badly on a week later on Wednesday after coming off that shift.
Okay.
And that's when something was up. And then I got a test on Friday because my colleague was positive. I really didn't feel that badly. If he hadn't tested, by Thursday I was feeling okay. And obviously I had to immediately go into quarantine for 2 weeks because I was now a close contact of a positive person. No matter what, I would have spent 2 weeks in isolation, but I actually tested positive. So you have no choice, and you have to check in. I have to check in with Department of Health every day, several times, which is ironic, but it's great to get those calls from them. And Eleanor is a terrific public health worker. She's calling me, bugging me about my symptoms, and I'm bugging her about getting more contact tracers up. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So
Yeah.
a week had transpired before
Yeah.
everything started to go. Okay.
Usually takes about 5 days. I'm almost certain I caught the virus driving up the coast on Saturday morning when we were in the car together. There's very little doubt in my mind. And then my symptoms began that Wednesday, which is exactly 5 days later, which is what all of the people say. They say 5 to 5.5 days you get symptoms if you're going to get them. Sure enough, just like that, I got feeling real achy and tired and wiped out, which again I don't make that much out of, except this was a lot more, I should say. It's one thing to sleep, but to sleep for 14 hours is very unusual for me.
So your security guy was that Saturday that you took the drive up that weekend. He that's the time he started to cough in the car when you were riding with him.
Yeah, and he has a chronic cough, so we didn't make much of it, but it's just it's just the risk you take. And sure enough, and he's doing great. My other security guard, he's having a little bit of a trouble. He's struggling right now, so he's getting some care, and God willing, he'll be okay. It affects everybody differently, as we know. So they're older than I am, and that sometimes means a higher risk usually. So all these things are right out of the textbook. Actually, it's been amazing to watch, and I feel for those guys. They're just great friends and great workers, and they're doing okay in general. I was amazed actually that my chief of staff tested negative. I was amazed that my wife tested negative. It shocked me. I hope that holds, just because you spend all this time playing cards together and sleeping together. But yeah, they've been fine.
The one of our Roxanne, one of our viewers, said she's having problems. She has symptoms. She doesn't have a fever, but they refuse to give her a test. Should she change doctors?
Yes, she should get someone to test her. She has to insist. Yeah.
You heard that, Roxanne? Seriously, go get tested.
Yeah.
Go get tested. So do you get another test before are you set free, or you just roll right back in after 14 days?
Amazingly, I've done a lot of research on this. I'm going to follow my doctor's advice. The answer is I don't actually get tested. I may get tests in the future for sure, but here's the rules. Tomorrow, technically by the CDC rules, if I don't have a fever tonight, I will be at 10 days since my symptoms began, and without fever for 24 hours, I'm technically released. Now, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to stay at home for an extra week because I want to do a full 2 weeks from the time I was tested positive, just to be super safe. And so I bought a treadmill that got delivered today, and I'm going to hang out with my family more once I'm fully asymptomatic, hopefully. But I'm going to lay low, still, because I want to make double, triple sure that I don't, number one, spread it to anybody. And also, I don't want people to worry. And, because I wear the scrubs all over the place, everyone sees me, and then they're going to be like, Green, are you sure you're okay? Are you spreading the virus? So I just as soon stay home and watch Netflix.
So let me ask you something with regards to this this period of time that you are at home. The CDC guidelines. I've been kind of like sounding the horn. It seems apparent. We hear it a lot, like with the Yukio Okutsu State Veterans Home. Every time Avalon comes on, they say, we followed the CDC guidelines, but it almost seems as if, okay, you followed the baseline. Yeah. Did you ever try to exceed? It sounds to me like you're exceeding the guidelines. Should that be a recommended? Because You know, it seems like CDC puts up the bare minimum, but because this thing is so unpredictable, we should go beyond. We should go
Yeah.
beyond the CDC guidelines. Correct?
Very good point, Charlie. Absolutely. That's why I'm going to go a whole full extra week beyond their guidelines. And if I have even a hint of any symptoms, I'm going to keep clear of people. So, and that means my family too, of course, because they're the last people I want to ever spread this to. But yes, I think doing a whole extra week makes sense. 2 full weeks from the positive test date, that should be safe. And even then, I'm still going to be extra careful because there are times, you know, no one's perfect. We don't always wear a mask. We should, best we can. I was on that radio show, and I'm first to admit, when we were demonstrating how to do the test, we didn't have a mask on, of course. So, you know, I plead guilty to that. And you do your best, right? But when you're outdoors, when you're near other people, wear a mask. Do it right now, and that'll help us knock down the virus faster. If nothing else, let's do that so that we can get back to normal. You know, I've been working really hard the last week on the protocols to get us ready, because now more than ever, I see the impact on people's lives of being at home in quarantine, in isolation. And I'm not saying that I know what everyone's pain has been. I just know what it feels like here. And I know what the concern is. I mean, I know how scary it is. You don't know whether the virus is going to go left or right. You can't tell. For some, it's nothing. For some others, it's catastrophic. So I want us to end this virus and then get back to like a normal economy, get back to school, and doing it the right way with tracing, testing, and masks makes a world of sense to me now after experiencing this.
All right. Now we're gonna get into the nitty gritty. We're gonna get into the recent. I know you expected it, and I really enjoy my spleen, Doc.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Well, you're on the line now.
Spare me my spleen. Hey, obviously, with the governor's announcement yesterday of opening up on October 15th, and one of the best things I've ever heard him say was that he put you in charge. Really, it really was one of the best things I've heard him say. But there's a concern, and that's gonna go straight from where this right before you came on. That's what we talked about. We feel like we are where we were several months ago when the governor first announced the initial plan to open to tourism. It was a one test, pre-test, 72-hour pre-test, which is pretty much what we have now. Then the discussion went after experts came up and talked about the fact that the one test, 72-hour prior to departure, would catch only about 30% of the virus carriers or the positive cases. Then I remember that governor started to talk about they're reassessing and considering going into a pre and a post travel test. So I think for me personally, I was kind of surprised when I heard him come out and said it was going to be one test, 72 hours before departure, and that was going to be it. And I kind of your case is kind of interesting because you were kind of in that same boat. Is that you took a test on Wednesday and it was about a week later, right?
Yes, exactly a week later. So I caught the virus. It's true. 3 days after testing, and so there will be that risk. But also, here's the other thing. If I had a trip planned for Hawaii, once I had symptoms, I would not have been able to get on a plane. There's a bunch of layers to this, right? There's the test 3 days before you travel. There's also, if you have any symptoms, fever or aches, fatigue, cough, shortness of breath, all of those also prevent a person from traveling to the state of Hawaii. So all of those things are built into the system. And in addition to the pre-test, we will also have the capacity, if people choose, whether it's in Kauai County or Maui or on Oahu, if hotels and others want to offer additional testing and services, there's nothing to stop that at all. So it's a multiple layer system. And the challenge, of course, is we have 4,000 tests that we can run each day. Let's say we go to 10,000 travelers or 8,000 travelers, right? Let's just say theoretically, and we do a pre-test. If we're also testing them 4 days after, that means every day we're going to have to come up with 10,000 tests to test people. We only have 4,000 tests. So we wouldn't be able to deliver on that promise. Now, we are expanding testing. We're going to get that up to 13,000 in the not too distant future. I know that that is a part of the plan because I'm writing that plan with the Department of Transportation and Health. So we will have a lot more capacity, but it's a lot to ask. And to do testing on asymptomatic people to the tune of $140 a pop is it's a big challenge, is all I'm saying. And so we're going to be wrestling with that until the end of the outbreak.
Governor, I need a real quick clarification, Charlie. I want to talk about that 72 hours because what is the rule? Is it no later than 72 or no sooner than 72?
No, technically it's no sooner than 3 days. So
right,
if you're flying on the 4th of October, let's say November, okay, after the deadline, after the date in October 15th. If you're flying on October 17th, you can get tested on the 16th, 15th, or 14th. And you have to get tested on one of those 3 days.
Right. You can't go beyond that.
Say again?
You cannot go beyond that, meaning like the 4th day. So it's got to be 72 hours or less, correct? Leading up to the travel.
Yes.
Because the reason why the Hawaii Gazette said it the other way around.
Yeah, the Big Island Gazette came out with a big thing, and it's all over. It's viral. I screenshotted it just because it confused me. In fact, it says, as an alternative to quarantine, a traveler must produce evidence of a negative COVID-19 test no earlier than 72 hours prior to their flight arrival in Hawaii. So that's backwards.
It depends how you read that sentence. No earlier than within the 72 hours. So earlier on the calendar, I guess, is what they're trying to express.
But he says clear to flight, right?
Yeah, it's better to
arrival in Hawaii.
It's better to say within 3 days of your travel and your arrival in Hawaii. That's the better thing to say, and that is the rules. And we're going to actually be spelling that out tomorrow in the governor's update of the emergency proclamation. It'll be very, very clear. And I'll be holding several updates and press conferences and conversations so that people know exactly what it means. You know, the 3 days preceding your arrival to Hawaii, you got to get it one of those days.
See, this is one of the things that I posted, and you might have read it, Lieutenant Governor. The concern that a lot of people had was the fact that you take it 72 hours. Now you have that, like Willy Wonka, you have that golden ticket, right? You're safe. Now, how that information gets transmitted to Hawaii, it's another thing you guys got to work out, right? Because if I took a test 72 hours prior to, and my results came back that I was positive, but I'm destined to fly, unless you folks get the information, I can just make like I never took a test, and I run the 14-day, come to Hawaii, and run my 14 days out here, and go to a bubble. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to do that, but I think we're trying to prevent spreading the virus, and that's one way of bringing it in, and that's been the concern if that should happen.
I hear you. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think someone would have to be pretty sinister to get the positive test and decide they're still going to travel, they're still going to come, they're going to then either go into quarantine, which if you're in quarantine, you can't really spread it, which is good. But if they also then decided they were going to lie about the test and break quarantine and run the risk of getting fined, that's a lot of ifs that are very unusual. Yeah, you're kind of talking about a pretty pathological person at that point. And there's certain things.
We've had some pretty pathological people lately.
I can tell you, just based on the comments that are floating around on Facebook, it's, how everybody searches for the loopholes, and it's just, that's how people are, and they're gonna do what they
I agree with you. I totally agree, but let me push back a little bit. To actually know that you're positive, okay? To know that you're positive, and you're gonna sit on a plane with some people for 6 hours, right? Mm-hmm. And then go run around Hawaii, knowing that you could have a dangerous, life-threatening disease that could kill you in Hawaii. Yeah. You have to be messed up in the head. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen, but if we're going to be pretty strict with people, if they show up without their test, they're going in. And I'm still pushing. I don't know if I'll win this battle, but I'm still pushing to have people go to designated facilities to stay that we can actually enforce, which would be good because, then we can watch over.
I think why
So
people I think why people are looking at this is because the virus is so new. But then when you have on state sides, you have these COVID parties. They knowing that they have the virus, and like the kid, he passed away, right? They're knowing that they're positive and they're doing it. I think it those kind of things. But you're right. It'd probably be the percentage would be very, very small. Somebody would do it. But again, what if that person becomes the super spreader? That's
oh,
another thing. That's a spooky thought. But
it
that's
is.
that's highly
It's
speculative.
and I'm a bit of an optimist, and we are going to put in a lot of extra precautions. I'm also hoping that over time we do get to the rapid tests where we can ask everybody to get a test when they get here, when they touch down, so that they get one when they come here, and we just make it part of our plan. A lot of places are doing that. If we get to that point, it would be great. And I certainly am, I'm on people's side when we talk about doing that. So it would just give us another layer of support. And I'm speaking with the hotels, for instance, that whole industry, to say, you know what? It's a good investment for you, for your hotel workers. Why don't you have some free tests around? It's only for the rapid tests, sometimes only 20, $30, right? Why don't you just build that into your experience and let people get tested with some frequency, especially if they have any concern at all? Because the more testing we do, if we are tracing, the better off we are. No question about it.
My wife, being a hotel person for 45 years, she said, you know, basically, if you notice hotels over the years, and Mel can attest to this working at Timbers, they just roll it into a resort fee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Of course. Yeah. I know they're not going to pay for it.
This
New
is
Yorkers
the
are going to pay for
reality.
that. That's fine.
Today, the airlines went berserk. They went nuts. We made every local news on the mainland about Hawaii is open. Airline fares $242 round trip now. So they can afford another 30 damn dollars to get a test. I mean, that's the way I look at it is,
Well, I have some good news for you on that. Let me tell you. So I was working with one of the major airlines today. They're going to offer tests at the airport. United Airlines is going to set up testing kiosks for right before people get on the flight if they want. And I approved the test that they can do today, which is the Abbott ID Now, which is a rapid test. So I think that's going to become real standard, that people are going to be flying, but hey, why don't you go get a test? Because you're darn well going to get locked in if you show up in Hawaii without one. So I'm hopeful that the human spirit will be more generous than some of those crazy people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the fear, it just, a lot of uncertainty. I know the governor talked about the numbers were dropping in Hawaii, and we all know it's coming back up again, right? We had about another 160 or so,
160.
several more deaths. I got the alert again tonight that the Veterans Care Home had 2 more deaths after the report today. So, I mean, it's not that it's getting better. The other big question we have right now, oh, and before I get to the next question, didn't the legislature appropriate $8 million for the airports to run testing out of the airports?
Well, they gave a ton of money. They gave, I think, 70 million to do testing and preparations. And so, yes, Ford is going to be putting that in there. A lot of that will be for testing anybody who's symptomatic or has any health problems whatsoever. But also, yes, to set up some freestanding testing capacity right there. And, we kind of want to walk before we run with our governor because he's so risk averse and he doesn't like to make kind of like the big splash decisions. And I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that, in my opinion, if we have the testing capability, use every test every day. You got it, and even if it's an extra layer on top of an extra layer, get the results. Maybe you stop another super spreader, like Charlie said, or you stop a case that got caught in the middle, that someone was negative and they were behaving properly, but they happened to catch it. So if you can catch people that way, I think it's good. So I think it makes sense.
The rapid test, what's the sensitivity rate on that? Some people are asking the accuracy.
A lot of them are like 95, 96%. The Binax test is very good. And the Abbott ID Now has varied, but it's up in the mid 90s most of the time. So, usually when you have those rapid tests, the way I would approach them is You use them on low risk people. If someone's symptomatic, you use the reverse transcriptase PCR test. You go all the way in there, right? Go right to the brain. But if you have asymptomatic people with no concerns, I think it's fine. And you just expect that you may have to test again if you have any concerns after that. So there's a lot to recommend it. And I think that the whole world's going to get to a place where we test more, just like we test for the flu. We'll test people routinely.
So one last question, and I'll leave the rest of the night to Mel. I heard you say earlier, would you allow, since you're running this program,
yeah,
the counties, in case they wanted to take extra measures, as an example, people coming into their airports,
sure.
You're not opposed to counties running any additional programs, are you?
No, I think that they'll have to. I think the standard way you approach these things normally is there's a state rule or state approach, and then if they want to add extra layers of security, it's perfectly reasonable. I don't think this is an era where you should say no to anybody who wants to be more careful. It will, of course, curtail overall travel to each of the other counties if that happens, but that's okay. I think if the mayors feel strongly, they're not shy about things, right? If for instance, Mayor Kawakami says, you know what, we're doing so well on Kauai, we're going to invest some of our CARES money in some extra tests, and we're going to ask everyone to get a test or else they're going into a bubble, fine. I mean, I'm not the kind of guy that ever really argues with extra security or safety. I would just say that the idea of, if we're going to tell people that you cannot go into somewhere without having to do an extra 4 days or something, we should tell them up front just so they know what they're getting into when they make their trip. But otherwise, I think it's totally fine. I don't like it when people try to demagogue power and just say it's my way or the highway. I think it would be good if we got extra input.
Okay.
I think the struggle is, for me anyway, and I think for a lot of people, the governor said that he wasn't going to lift inter-island travel until our numbers drop, until our state numbers of active cases drop. But yet he's okay with allowing anyone from a hot zone with much more higher numbers than we have in Hawaii to take a test, get on a plane, and roam free here in Hawaii. He's not allowing an inter-island passenger like myself to go visit my auntie who's watching this tonight in Kailua. My auntie's mom, who's my grandma, who's over 100 years old, she cannot come here to visit her mom because she's going to be forced to a 14-day quarantine. But the governor, that's the mixed message I get, is while our numbers are high, it's relative, right? Because we have a smaller population in a lot of these states. But the bottom line is the states that are red, that are hot zone states, there's no restriction or limitation for them, but there's limitations and restrictions for us local residents.
Yeah.
And it's not fair. I think I'm struggling with that big time.
Well, let me share some stuff with you there, Mel. I actually think that it's likely, and this is just me saying it, but I think it's likely that the inter-island quarantine restriction will go away in advance of October 15th. I think that does make sense. I think also there's no reason we can't offer people to take a test if we want to get out of the quarantine, again, with the same rules, within 3 days of their travel inter-island. That makes perfect sense to me also. So the challenge with that is we may not have all those extra surplus tests. Remember, historically, when people were traveling inter-island a lot, the average number of trips per day was 25,000 people. So if we were getting that much traffic, we wouldn't have the tests. So I think come 30 days from now, because today is September 17th. So by October 15th, I'll be personally surprised if we haven't lifted the inter-island quarantine and allowed for inter-island travel. I think that we're going to be pretty diligent in testing and tracing people. And I think we're going to, if there's a lot of cases on Oahu, I think the neighbor islands are going to be a little bit wary. But I think that it probably will be free travel by then. and we'll be together before then, so I'll be able to share with you what everyone's thinking. But I'm guessing that that's going to be the case.
Okay, and then I got one more tough question, and then I'll turn over the rest of the show to Charlie.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I hate to put you on a spot, but I will.
It's fine.
Because you're the LG, man. You're the LG.
Sure.
You know, since over the last several months, we've had a lot of people on our show. We had Dr. Schwartz and I got to look at the names, Evslyn Alderete, Dr. Dara O'Carroll, who wrote an amazing article in Civil Beat on September 3rd. We've had Dr. Jerome Kim from South Korea, Dr. Akhtar from Arizona. And I believe that the general consensus was the more you test for these travelers, the safer it would be. The fact that the number was, and I know the state came out with a number, and I'm not sure where they got their 70%. The state came out saying that the Department of Health came out and saying that the pretest, one pretest, 72-hour pretest, would catch 70% of the positives. Yet all these other experts are saying the same thing, that it's not. You're going to miss 70%. You're going to catch 30%. Was that any indication? Why would the governor veer away from the dual test, the multiple testing? Is it because of the cost of the test? Is it because we don't have the testing capability?
We simply,
and I'm going to be blunt, Lieutenant Governor. You know, was the pressure to open up the state a lot stronger than the to try to get more testing capacity in Hawaii so we could test what we needed to test?
No, actually. So a couple things. First of all, they're wrong about only catching 30%. It's not correct. I mean, the tests that we're talking about have like 96 to 99% accuracy rate. So, and most people, remember, are not positive. So very few travelers are going to be walking around as asymptomatic positive COVID people. Very few people. Then the tests are accurate. They just are accurate. They're not only 30% accurate, and very few people are going to catch it within that extremely unlucky 72-hour window before they travel. It's just not that many people. But even so, I'm not arguing that it'd be perfect, okay? That's one thing. So they're not correct. It's much easier to be negative and to make people scared about something than it is to be affirmative about a scary thing, which COVID is scary. But it seems like it's taboo to just be fact-based about COVID, because when you're fact-based, then we can not scare people and we can say we have to be safe and prevent the disease. But if the tests were only catching people 30% of the time, people would have gotten rid of these tests all a long time ago. No one would be paying for tests.
No,
so
they're not saying that the test is 30% accurate. What they're saying is that because of the period, the waiting period, because you don't have a subsequent test, that in fact you could come through this line, you could take that test. Your test is accurate. You are negative. You're 100% accurate, 97, 98% accurate. The fact is that you could be in a part of your infection that's not being picked up by the test, but you're carrying the virus. And then when you get to Hawaii, the test was accurate. But because you're only doing the one test, and based on the numbers, and I read the Kauai discussion group's report, which was actually written by a doctor in Washington State University or University of Washington, and they had all the specific that they had the data and so I don't know. It looked legitimate to me that in fact it made sense that if it, like in your case, you took a test, you were negative. If you had gotten on a plane, there's a chance that without that follow-up test, you could be allowing people that are carrying the virus, just not being identified by the test yet, that'll be in our islands roaming, spreading the virus.
Well, in this case, this is a perfect example because we followed the protocols. The moment anyone was symptomatic or positive, we got a test. And that would apply to any traveler and anyone, unless they're a lying fool, and didn't follow the proper guidance from health officials. Okay. So this case, in my case, it absolutely verifies the reality, which is if you get in contact with someone that's of risk, you go get a test, period. End of story. So it worked. Now, why people think that suddenly think if you're a traveler, you're living in Texas somewhere, you've been fine all this time, you haven't had COVID, because otherwise you'd be immune and be allowed to travel. You never had COVID at all. You go get a test. You only have a small % chance anyway of becoming positive, but it's not nothing. It might be as high as like 3% of a whole population over the course of the year in that community. So in those 3 days, you get a negative test, it's accurate. And then just in the tiny 3 days from that time, you're that unlucky to both catch it and become contagious. It's very little chance. So you can't stop everything. You never would be able to. In fact, I'll go one further for you, okay? The reason that argument doesn't hold any water is because we have people right now around us with COVID, right, that are out there. Travelers could come, be negative on their test, and then bump into one of us who is positive and spread it the day after test. You will never be able to stop it to zero. But what you can do is the right things. You get a mask on somebody and so on. Now, let's talk about a post-test, just from a practical standpoint, okay? Yes, if we truly wanted to, we could, and it would be challenging, we could start trying to buy up as many tests as exist in the world, right? Which everyone's competing for. And we could then say to everyone, you will go only to a quarantine hotel and you will test 4 days after you've been tested after your travel. That's what people are recommending, right? And we could do that. I'm just saying that no one will come. And that's okay. If that's what people choose, people will not come. They will not come in numbers adequate to do anything. And so then you're just making a choice whether or not that's okay with us as a policy. And that's an okay policy decision for people to make. It's not practical. Also, it would mean that you'd have to come up with at least 10,000 extra tests a day when we only have the 4,000 that we're using. We don't have it. So you would not really open up travel. So that's not really a recommendation to open up travel right now. That's a recommendation to continue to have travel be at 5 or 10%, very low, until you have a vaccination. Because people are not going to spend their time and energy coming to Hawaii if they know that 4 days out of their 8 or 10 has to be spent in isolation in a hotel until they get their second test. Because if you do it right when they land, you're not going to catch anything. It takes 5 days basically from the time that you get exposed to the virus to testing positive, almost always, my case included. So these are the challenges that we've had. And in the abstract, it sounds really good. It sounds great when Dr. O'Carroll or whoever, and they're good guys, write these think pieces about what we'd like to do. And then there's the real world. That's not the real world. Sooner or later, when there's rapid tests that we can do inexpensively, that we actually have the products for, that we can get it, then sure, it'll be great. But it's a different decision. And so I really think that people should be more honest with it. It's just very easy to write those opinion pieces. Now, would I like us to offer extra tests? You bet I would. And I would think it would be great if we made it clear that Hawaii is going to offer as much testing capacity as we have available at the end of every day. If people would like to get a test, whether they're visitors or locals or whomever, I think we should be doing that. And I'm recommending that. It's just that the idea of coming up with a revolving door of tests is not feasible yet. Now, there is discussion. For instance, we have heard from Oceanit, a very smart guy named Sullivan, who has his test, right? Eventually, that's going to be a rapid test where they intend to have 3 or 5 samples where you just quickly get a swab and you test every 2 days. Now, his technology hasn't been finalized yet. He has to get approved. But once we have that kind of thing, of course, we would want to. But right now, what people are really talking about is essentially having a program that would, in order to probably stop 5 to 10 cases a day, 5 to 10 total a day from coming into Hawaii that you might miss through the test, they catch it, You don't catch them with their temperature. You don't catch them with any symptoms. You don't catch them at the airport. They lie to you about everything that they've come into contact with. And then it's still only probably 10 cases out of, say, 8,000 people. And they are asymptomatic, remember. So they're not really contagious, or not particularly contagious. To not have any tourism or jobs for that is an awfully difficult thing to say to the people of Hawaii when they can't pay for food. So it's, and we still, by the way, test anybody if after they do get here and we have any concern for them. We will still give them full on attention, testing, isolation if they actually do merit a test. And my final piece of evidence to this whole thing was the surge testing, right? We spent so much energy on surge testing, which I know sounded great, but we tested 60,000 people. We probably spent $30 million doing it. Okay, stopping highways and whatnot. And how many people tested positive? 330 people total that were asymptomatic. We were getting 160 people a day. Before that, we were getting 300 a day, right? It's one day worth. And we spent $30 million. We could have spent that money isolating people, giving them hotel rooms. We could have spent that money on, we could have given 3,000 people. Actually, we could have given more than that. We could have given 30,000 people $1,000 check for rent. Or we could do and catch 300 cases. So people aren't necessarily making logical decisions because it's so scary. And I respect that. I mean, I really understand. Having been through it, wondering, am I going to turn left instead of right with my COVID and get sick and die? I understand how people feel. And I totally am with them. But we can't go on like that for 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. There's no way. We would have to get to a place where we opened up, and it might require more testing or other solutions.
Yeah. I think we talk about the surge testing on another episode because that was just another. I've received messages from more than one household that got notified via email that they were. One was that they were positive; they never took the test. The other one, their whole family got emails saying that their test was contaminated, so they need to retest. They never took the test. So I have a lot of concerns about that whole surge testing process, but I don't want to waste tonight's time on that.
No, well, we have plenty of time to talk. So let me just say this though, in support of extra testing, yes, let's do it, absolutely. But if we're going to do it, let's do it sensibly and take and target people that we have an additional concern about. Don't do it blindly, because doing it blind it'd be like doing surge testing constantly and getting very low yield. This is a time where we should use our resources to make sure we don't spread it. Like if we use that $30 million to make sure that we had contact tracers all over the place, right? Everywhere. So that everybody got contact traced within 6 hours. I mean, they were contact tracing on my behalf within 20 minutes after I tested positive. I called everybody. And I texted everybody and called everybody and said, you got to understand right now, you are a close contact. You need to get a test. You have to be at home until it's resolved. And it was immediately handled because obviously I took it upon myself and the Department of Health did a good job. If we had that $30 million active there, this is why we were complaining so bitterly about the Department of Health and not spending their $50 million on tracing and testing, because that money should have been stopping those 10,000 cases from occurring. We could have kept our case load down to like 3,000 or 4,000 total. We would have never had a problem opening up. And that's why I think the viewers were so upset that the program didn't get done right, or we didn't have full commitment from Department of Health. And I was the most upset, as you know. But it's having the right priorities. It's having the right approach. You guys do a lot of great stuff on Kauai to an extreme, but it certainly keeps the virus down. And I think that, it merits consideration to do the right stuff rather than a shotgun approach. And remember, a lot of people out there are saying you shouldn't ever test anybody who's asymptomatic. I disagree completely. I think anybody who is at risk, who is a contact of someone who's positive, should get tested. So if people come over on that plane and we find out that someone was positive, test everybody that came over. If somebody's in that resort now, after 2 days, test everybody, but maybe not test every single resort, because you're going to just, no, you'll never get over that. You'll never get through that cycle of work.
Here's my question, Doc. Um, when they had the surge testing, I know I came out and vehemently said, with that amount of resources, instead of going into a tunnel, maybe we should have targeted the areas that had the most outbreak, flood those areas to see if it's still spreading or if it's contained.
Yes.
That
That's
was
exactly right. Super saturate Kalihi,
Right,
Waianae, Waimanalo, right? Super saturate high risk people that live in large families, that give them a free test immediately. Super saturate the fire stations where there were a couple little outbreaks. Super saturate McDonald's. Sorry to Victor, because I love Victor and McDonald's is awesome. But I mean, like, you know, a McDonald's broke out. They did a great job. They test everybody. Do that at school if it lights up. That's the right approach. That's how I intend to approach it with my new role. And that's good. And so that way, if, like, let's say there's a part of, let's say Big Island, let's say that there's a resort near Kona where unfortunately a family lights up and tests positive after the fact or starts feeling symptomatic, let's test everybody there right away. Do 1,000 tests, no problem. That's a good use of it. But if you try to do all 12,000 people that came in blindly, and it just won't really work very well. For now, someday it'll be the easiest thing in the world. You'll, sooner or later, you're going to wipe this thing in your cheek and you're going to look at it, and 2 minutes later it's going to say positive or negative. I mean, that's coming, right? Today I got us to approve so we can use the saliva tests. We can use the nasal swabs as long as they're sensitive enough. I'm moving us in that direction so that we have every opportunity. The moment that anything is easy for us to get, we get it first. So that's, I think, the approach. And the previous leadership at the Department of Health just didn't really want to go after it like that, which is unfortunate, because I really think that we really could have beaten this thing back easier. Because, you know, there's 107 people that we've lost. And this is not about me, but it's been very difficult and hard on my family. I know they're very worried, and I'm very worried about everybody else out there. So I'm sure our worry level's like up here about COVID, and we got to get things back down to here, and we can do that.
Let me ask you one last thing. With regards to everything that's happened right now, and,
Sure.
and so we open up on the 15th, what is the triggers that will cause another shutdown of the state?
The triggers are moving past certain thresholds, and they're debating them right now. There's a lot of people who are saying 7 per 100,000 population. When you exceed that number in consecutive days for a week, that you end up needing to shut down. That would be about, for us, that would be, well, on Oahu, that would be 70 a day. And our rolling average has been 117 per day for the last 7 days. That's what our average has been. Today, it probably bumped up a little bit because we're at 160 today. I think that actually is somewhat arbitrary. I could tell you this, at 150 a day, we have more than enough hospital capacity to care for people. And we are at some point going to have to accept the fact that COVID is in our community. It's in our midst as people. We will get to a vaccination. I will have a plan ready for us, like you can't believe, to vaccinate everybody that chooses it before everyone freaks out. Only people that choose it will get the vaccination. But we'll get to herd immunity that way with a good vaccination. And I certainly hope it's sooner rather than later. But I hear all kinds of things. I'm going to have Dr. Fauci participate on a show with me sometime in early October. I'm going to ask him a lot of vaccination questions. And I'm asking questions you give me to ask him. And I think that, like the flu, we will have a vaccination that works pretty well. Not perfect, but pretty well. And because more people will have had COVID, they'll be immune. And we'll be better about things, not getting together with 400 people on Waimea Rock, maybe fewer people. You know what I mean? So things like that will make a big difference. But I hope that we don't have a whole nother year to deal with COVID. It's just too much on society psychologically.
Now this last question, and it's been on everybody's mind to deal with small businesses.
Yes.
You know, we're looking at businesses to the point that I'm still trying to find out the relationship with businesses and these clusters or these outbreaks.
Yes.
Some doesn't even have anything to do with the business, and yet small businesses are basically our pillars, economic pillars of our community.
Yeah.
How do we get them to open up so they can at least salvage what they have? Because going through it some more, we've already lost so much. I'm trying to find out, how does a cluster in a neighborhood associate with a business that doesn't even deal with that many people, and yet it's closed down? And then we're dealing with interpretation of what is essential. I mean, you can have like a Walmart or a Costco open, they keep on talking about that because they have pharmacies that open, right? But yet we know that people are going in and they're really not getting essentials. They're walking out with coolers and all these.
They're going in for that chicken.
Right.
That everybody wants, right?
So, it's those kind of things of how do we do the messaging? How do we get it right where, like for us on Kauai, take myself, for instance, we're pretty much open. But we're watching thing, and why it's painful is we have family on Oahu,
yes,
that's getting slammed left and right. And we had Tommy Silva on from TNT Tinting, and they're spending so much money to retrofit their business so they be the safest. So I recommended, hey, why don't we do a placard system? They get inspected. If they're found to be the safest, that there's no way they can get anybody sick, you get to open, because restaurants have placards right now, right? If you're not good, you get a red placard.
Right.
Give them a green placard, they're open for business.
Yeah, that's totally a good plan. I would say this: it's the mass fear that keeps this cycle going, where we get closures that were unnecessary. And as you know, I disagreed with the approach. I did agree to an extent that we had to go to a safer at home place, but that would still have allowed businesses that were not a threat to anybody to be open. The hot spots were essentially
Bars.
Cultural practices. So bars were an issue to a degree.
Right.
Cultural practices, although they can have placards too if they're a good bar, they're doing a good job. Cultural practices amongst the Pacific Islander community that hadn't had the opportunity to spread and socially distance, that was a risk. And there were some concerns about indoor restaurants, which could be handled. It was not, small retail shops were not our biggest concerns. Basically, it was people going home to their loved ones and spreading it in their family clusters, and then being out and about in big gatherings. Those are the things that we should have closed, and just having safer at home, in other words, just not gathering, no gatherings, and people doing their lives, going about their lives, but always wearing a mask if they went for that chicken at Costco, right? Get the free pizza or whatever it is, or the hot dog, but get out of there with a mask on. You are not going to catch it. And if you have your small business, it should not be shut down, because there's just not really that much risk. So that's where we will get, and where actually we should land right after this. We're going to come on the other side of this mountain here on the 24th, and I expect that the mayor and the governor, maybe not for the right reasons though, I think they're going to do it because they feel pressure. Instead of just doing it based on analytic reasons, they're going to feel pressure that they have to open up. And that pressure makes you make bad decisions sometimes, or decisions that are not, based and rooted in science. So it's very difficult. It's not a rational thing. I guess as we wrap up our hour, COVID is not rational. Once a person has had COVID, they look at it through a different lens. They're just like, holy cow, everyone said it was no big deal, but I could have died, and I don't want that guy giving me the disease. So everyone's got a different, level of fear, but the best thing to do is to be analytical about it, be smart. If you wear a mask, you're protecting yourself pretty well. You're also doing society a favor. If you socially distance, you're doing society a favor. And then there's the Department of Health, and everyone has to do their part with the tracing and testing, because without that, it's too difficult to put out the fires. That's all there really is to the whole situation. And by doing that, as I wrote in the Star Advertiser, by having those points, 400 to 500 contact tracers, 10,000 tests, masks all the time, total transparency that we're getting the job done, and enough healthcare, you do those things, small businesses will be open forever, and travel will be fine. You know, we'll test the guys, but they're going to have to adhere to these rules. Don't go out in big gatherings. We will get to a vaccination. And I'm not saying I'm the only one with the right answer, but I do think that is the best answer I've been able to come up with after all these months. And I know it would have prevented me from catching COVID. It would have prevented 6,000 other people from catching COVID. And it would have also kept a lot more people alive because we would have had much lower numbers. Not to mention the fact we probably would have opened businesses up sometime around like August 1st. So all those people that are really caught in the middle and they don't want to be on unemployment, they want to have their life back. I think that's where we would be. So that's just my take on it. Like I said, I'm just one part of this discussion, but I hope that people think it through that way. And if there's other things that are good safety measures, like you guys are talking about, or some of the doctors talk about, which I believe in, like extra tests, great. But we should do it in a targeted way. I mean, we will have to anyway until we have more tests. But if Kauai said, you know what, there's 1,000 surplus tests, we want to be the test bed for all those extra tests for our travelers, give us those tests, I say yes. Why not? But do it in a smart way. And don't just throw the kitchen sink at this thing, because we saw what happens when you throw the kitchen sink at it with the surge testing. You get a whole lot of information, some of which was junk, as Mel pointed out. Most of it was pretty thin information, you know, a couple hundred positives out of 60,000 people, and you don't even know where they're from. So that didn't help you at all. So let's use our money and our testing and our strategies really smart, really wisely, and we'll still be better off than almost everywhere else. This is the next phase coming, though. I'm eager to see how it plays out, because I think that we owe Hawaii a success after what happened in July and August.
Well, I hope our mayor. I just not comfortable. I just want to be as safe as we can. We're at zero. We've been at zero, and we do it a little different over here. But I think for one island to test a post-test method and see and compare it with another county that doesn't.
Sure.
That'll be a great test.
Yeah. And I'll be happy to, look, I will always support the mayors if they come up with something where they want to do more. You bet. Really. I think it's not going to be irrational. It's going to be a sensible ask. It doesn't mean that you'd have to test everybody at every moment, but you could figure it out. You could also test certain resorts and see if it worked. There's just lots you could do. So keep the ideas coming, and maybe this time next week I'll be able to fly over to Kauai and scare everybody.
I haven't spoken to Derek, so I'm not sure even where he's at in all of this. I know he was working really hard on the bubble, and we don't have time to talk about the bubble. But one of the things, because we've been talking about wearing a mask, and we know it's proven that wearing the mask will. Hi, how are you?
You are in a call.
That's my daughter Maya. She's sneaking in.
Hey Maya, how's it going?
All of Kauai. There you go.
Hi.
You.
I just did.
You did 3 miles on the treadmill. I had a girl.
Awesome, girl. Awesome.
Oh,
I did 7 miles today.
I beat you to it.
Yeah,
I did.
They won't let me out of this freaking room, but they're using my
I did
treadmill.
7 miles, Doc. After work today, I did 7 miles.
See, you look good.
In my truck.
Oh, you did it in the truck.
Okay.
Well, I was going to give you credit.
Yeah. The mandatory mask, is that something that you folks have discussed? That's something the governor is willing to do? Just mandate the mask wearing? I mean,
I've asked them, and I've actually spoken with the judiciary. They have to get through the logistics of that. The reality of the statute is that because they put it in statute that it's a misdemeanor, any violations related to COVID, right now it has to be still a misdemeanor with the $5,000 and 1 year in jail penalty. So they need to work through that. But I've asked the Chief Justice and others who are friends to sort through that so that we can just have a mandatory mask rule. You don't do it, you get $100 fine. No court time, no nothing. Maybe the second time you get another $100. So, it's the right way to go about it. There is essentially a mask mandate right now. It's just completely unwieldy. And we know that if the police cite you, they're not going to haul you into court and have you pay a $5,000 fine. So it's just not practical. We need some stuff that's practical. And that's why I want them to revisit that.
You know, I
All right,
did.
Doc. Go ahead, Charlie.
You know, I did mention it before that, and especially when the mayor puts out a certain kind of rule about the solo rule that didn't make sense. You know, in order for a behavioral modification to happen, you got rules. You got to enforce the rules. You can't just put rules on the books and don't do nothing, because then you'll get more defiance than compliance, and that's what you're asking for, compliance. Right. And I think, you know, if they're going to throw something out there, then do something, because that's the only way we're going to get everybody on. Because I've always looked at it that if we can just comply and keep those numbers down, we'd be open a lot sooner. But if you guys want to goof off and keep those numbers up, and, you know, some people said, nah, I said, buddy, I don't make the decision. You don't make the decision. The governor makes the decision, and he's going to pull the trigger on this one, and we're going to get shut down again. Watch. And sure enough, it happened. I said, there you go. I rest my case.
You're right. You're right. The two ways to get people to follow the rules are, number one, don't make stupid rules, right? Number two, if you got a rule that you have to have, make it enforceable. And in this particular case, we have not, on that solo walking and being out there rule, we didn't achieve either of those goals. So we could do better. I will say that overall, the numbers for the hospitals have come down some from their peak at 318, and the average number of cases per day has been coming down. But I sure would like to see it a lot lower from all this sacrifice. And so we now have, I think it's one more week until it's a week from tonight, if I'm not mistaken, before the next decision point has to come from the governor and mayor. We'd like certainly to have some of our freedoms back, but also have businesses be safe and, you know, see that this virus keeps shrinking. I'm almost certain you'll hear the following from them: that one, people can go out in small family gatherings, essentially their household gatherings, to the beach. Two, that business can open up if they're doing it safely and intelligently, like you've described, small businesses. They'll probably stick to no significant gatherings of any number outdoor at beach parks or beaches, and they will make sure that there are ways to cite or give people citations if they're not wearing a mask properly. If you do those things, we will be fine. Meanwhile, the Department of Health, which is now well over 200 contact tracers, and they're beefing up the number of tests, will be able to do its job a lot better. That's, in my opinion, the secret to the success of this thing. All this has to happen. You leave one part out, it's probably not going to work. So I'm going to fight. You know, I'm still doing like 7 or 8 hours of meetings a day, trying to make sure we get this stuff done. And lots of good people are working on it, tons of people. So, you know, root them on. When you hear somebody saying something good, you know, cheer them on, and let's get those plans in place.
Thanks, Doc. I know we're in overtime. Charlie, any closing comments real quick before we
Yes.
say aloha no?
Real fast, one quick question regarding the 72 hours. A juror asked, you know, they want to take a test here in Hawaii. They take it and they're going to go to California to pick up their grandson and come back. Will the 72-hour test hold? But you're actually looking at 72 hours from the destination coming into Hawaii, correct?
Yes. Okay. So within 72 hours of their travel, in that particular case, when they land in California, although if they're just going for a day and a half, it's going to be a totally useless exercise. But what you are doing is you're trying to set a standard so that everyone gets a test equally and fairly. Yep. And that's what we'll push for. I think that we're going to find that the fall is good to us overall with this protocol, and the fact that people have really learned a lot. I'm very hopeful, and I'll do my best to to make sure everybody kind of sees the experience through my eyes and through your eyes. And just guys, I'm so worried about you when I see friends maybe out there without a mask on or losing hope. Don't lose hope. This is a very tough year. It's toughest year that I can remember, but don't lose hope. Hawaii is still magical. And I expect we're going to have a good fall. I think we will get businesses going again. And I can tell you this as a doctor in the emergency department, the resiliency of the human spirit is unbelievable. I've seen people have a terrible, terrible tragedy, and a month later, I see them laughing and hugging and getting on with their lives. It is unbelievable how people can bounce back. And my whole life, I've had to watch tragedy occur in the emergency department, and it informs how I look at things. And I think that that's what will happen after this year. I think that people will look back at this year and see that we weathered some very super tough times and that we're okay. And Hawaii is going to be loved like never before. So that's my expectation. But it's going to take work too. And so let's all work at it.
Okay. Well, I'd like to say, first of all, my bidding farewell. Thank you so much, Doc. I know a new team has been formed. You, General Hara, and Dr. Libby Char. And I openly posted it that, I'm glad it's about time. But, the governor needs to stay out of you guys' way. Let you guys do your job. And I think if they keep the politics out and just do what is right for the people of Hawaii by keeping everybody safe, then I think we'll be okay. And so I thank you very, very much. I thank the viewers. A lot of good questions. Sorry we didn't get to all of it, but thank you so much. And I hope you folks all know that this 1 hour goes by, but it's a lot longer than if you saw him, the governor, on Lieutenant Governor on KITV or KHON. We give that whole time for him to explain. We didn't get all the answers because we just couldn't get everything in, but at least we got some of them. So just want to thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. I'll see you again soon, I'm sure.
All right, Doc. Well, thank you very much. Again, we're praying for your full, quick recovery. I ask a personal favor, just, keep track of what's going on over there. The numbers, I worry about the numbers. Our numbers are increasing again. I mean, is this curve flattened? Is it not flattened? Just keep an eye out for us. I'm concerned. I really am. If this numbers continue to rise, and I'm not asking a question, we'll have this discussion later, but does that push out the October 15 date? We're resilient. We're very resilient state. We're very, very resilient people. But, we cannot keep on getting smacked down. We cannot continue open up, shut down, open up, shut down, open up, shut down, because that's the most devastating thing. And you know this, Doc, and we've had this discussion where people get discouraged. Their balloons keep getting bursted. So, just please make sure that we do it right, like you said, and we do it right and it lasts. So we don't have to have one more shutdown, another major shutdown. I think it just tears away. So we trust you guys. I trust you.
Yeah.
Cannot say that of everyone, but
thank you.
We just ask that you keep doing what you're doing and get well, man.
Okay. Thank you for that.
All right, people.
Thank you for such nice words.
Thank you. Tomorrow night we got Gary Moore from Timbers Resort. I saw a lot of questions about the bubble. Tomorrow night we ask the questions about the bubble. The bubble is an individual thing between the resort and our mayor. And so we'll have all that questions for you guys tomorrow night for Timbers Resort. And I understand there's a couple more hotels that are interested and are looking for it. So tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. We'll see you guys then. God bless. Take care. God bless. Doc, Lieutenant Governor. We'll see you guys tomorrow night.
Thank you. Take care, guys.